This is Self-Actualization Systems, and this is the most complete guide on YouTube about how you can uncover and heal your deep-rooted insecurities and beliefs about yourself. So what we're going to be covering today is what beliefs actually are in a no-nonsense, no mystical way so that you can actually have a deep understanding of what beliefs are without having anything that isn't practical in your mind. The next is how you are creating and trapping yourself in your identity, because beliefs, a collection of them, make up your core identity. And if you can change the beliefs that your identity believes in, then you can actually become a totally different person, or in the way that I like to describe it, you can unlock your actual true ideal self. Third is how you grow attracted to your beliefs and identity, and how you can become trapped in this attraction for years. This is the part which so many people get stuck in. 4 is the most common block I see when it comes to personal development, belief rewiring, and self-actualization. And 5 is how to actually uncover and heal the root cause of your beliefs and your identity. So what is the thesis of this masterclass? The thesis is that you are not static, your identity is constructed. So attachment is what holds these constructs together, what holds these beliefs together. And it's what holds them in place, it's what makes it feel like you are just a static person that doesn't really change. And fulfilling the positive intention in a more intentional way and not in an unconscious, subconscious way, that is how beliefs lose their power, and that's how beliefs lose their hold over us, and that's how we can actually change our identity to becoming more authentic rather than less authentic. And the final cure is to give back the belief where it comes from. So an important notice, just because you've had something for a long time, so this can be a life situation, this can be a series of life events such as you've had a string of bad exes, it can be an inability to assert yourself, it can be being a nice guy, it can be being a people pleaser, it can be being anything. Just because you've had this for a long time doesn't actually mean that this is something that you're stuck with. And it also doesn't mean that this is something which is just you and there's nothing that you can do about it. You are not trapped in your identity. That's a very, very important belief to get rid of first. So if this is something that you're having trouble with, then this is the thing which you should use the rest of this video to overcome. So a quick reality check that we can go through right now, if we don't want to wait that long, is am I the same person fundamentally as I was 10 years ago? When I say the same person, I mean, do I have the same behaviors? Did I have the same thoughts? Did I have the same interests? If I did have the same interests, is the part of interest, the specific thing that I'm interested in, is that exactly the same? Or has it matured? Has it changed? Has it been influenced by something? You want to not rush this process. You want to really go through every single area of your life, and every single area of your life that's relevant, of course, because the answer is going to be no. There's a few exceptional circumstances of people that I've worked with where the answer is no, but that's usually much more to do with maybe if there is something like a real legitimate depression that's going on, it can make it really hard for you to see and step out of this storyline. However, there are people who have suffered with depression who don't get stuck in this. So it's a very, very specific thing. It's just something that bears mentioning. There will actually be some areas that will feel like you've gone back. So that is a change. That means that you aren't static. It means that your identity isn't trapped. It's gotten worse, but you're not trapped. However, you can never actually go back. This is actually a really important point, because every experience, every mistake, every failure actually changes your identity, but it changes it in a way where you get more experience because you have a loss of innocence. Something that surprised you will no longer surprise you. So whilst it might feel like a failure and you've taken a few steps back, it's actually much more powerful than that, because through that failure, we just have to turn the lens of how we're looking at it, and then suddenly we can see that it's just an experience game. So in jiu-jitsu, or in a lot of athletics, or a lot of athletic endeavors, there's a really famous quote, which is you either win or you learn. And that's what it is, learning. So a good kind of age distinction that you can do for this is 16 versus 26. Am I the same person as I was then to now? And again, the answer will be no. There's nothing special about us becoming a much more mature adult, let's say late 20s, early 30s, late 30s. There's nothing special about that age range, which means your identity is just more trapped or it's more stuck. You're changing all of the time. That's what this part is supposed to be illustrating right now. So examples from my life is confidence in dating. I was afraid to even look at, express to, or talk to women that I was attracted to. I was also afraid of groups very slightly, or being around people that I perceived as high status or as above me, okay? But now, because I no longer have the belief that was driving this, which is I have to prove something, or I'm a permanent underdog, or I'm just unattractive. These are all beliefs that I held. Because these beliefs were healed at an identity level, this problem doesn't arise for me anymore. And it's not I feel better or I feel less anxious or I can push through it. The actual emotions that I was feeling, the thoughts that was going through my head, the insecurities that were coming up do not come up for me anymore. That's the power of this belief healing work. Another one, which I just touched upon, is the underdog. I had like a very strange relationship with underdog story. I thought it was noble. I thought it was noble suffering. I thought it was something which gave me a lot of strength and it gave me a lot of grit. And in some cases and in some ways that was true, but I could have all of that without being attached to the underdog storyline. Because if you're an underdog, you can pull off an upset, a one-off upset, but you can never actually win or be successful in a consistent way. And when you're doing something like jiu-jitsu or you're trying to do something like jiu-jitsu professionally, you have to win consistently. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen for you. I hate to break it for you. You might have a 5 minutes of fame and a few moments in the sun, but you want that to be a consistent thing rather than it to be a not consistent thing. And that applies to all areas of life too. And this is a thing that actually a lot of guys, which I see, struggle with. Not all of, it doesn't have to always be guys, but this is a lot of guys that I work with for whatever reason. And once this was gone, like I hinted upon, I was able to actually win much easier. I was able to be successful in whatever endeavor I chose, so in business or in life or in the kind of life that I wanted to build. I could do all of that, socialize much, much easier because I didn't have this identity that was pulling me in the opposite direction. So now we're going to be getting into the mechanism of how beliefs actually work. So your identity or the identity is the story that you tell yourself day in, day out, moment to moment. And it's a branching narrative. It can be more complex, it can be less complex. It depends on the person. And this is something which we are participating in every moment of every day. We are an active participant. When people talk about the unconscious or subconscious or the monkey mind or anything to do with beliefs or identity, there's this kind of like mystical, shadowy element, which I can kind of understand. But what it does is it actually makes us feel really disempowered because it puts this mystical thing out there that we can't understand. And it's like, oh, I can't really do anything about that. But we are active in this. We are always participating in this. We are perceiving and co-creating this identity. So if we stop being active, then we stop our identity and it changes organically. We don't have to say, oh, I am good enough. That has problems, which we'll get to later. We can just stop saying I'm not good enough or putting conditions on good enough. And then the lack of limits, limitless, the lack of limits allows something new to grow from that space. So we have parts also we're brought into. So parts are not actual different distinct parts within us. They're semi-autonomous personalities and identities that go on. So it's like an identity, your competitor identity, it can be a fighter identity, it can be a business person identity. We have different parts that we're brought into and different parts that we're disenchanted with. And this also affects our identity because it affects what we lean into and what we lean out of. So if you're not careful, it can create a really unbalanced personality. So if you're talking about the underdog personality or the I'm not attractive personality, either of those two, then the underdog, it leans into everything has to be hard and it leans away from easy wins, which will actually help you in the long term. And the I'm not attractive personality, it leans into attractiveness or non-attractiveness, non-sexiness, non-sensuality, anything to do with that, which are all parts that we have inside of us, they're all aspects within us. And it makes you lean into things that are more conventionally unattractive or even demonize attractive parts within you. And that has real world consequences, like you become less attractive or you become less able to just appreciate the small wins. And that overall affects your vibe, it affects your personality, it affects the circle that you surround yourself in. So now we're going to go into what actually builds an identity. So when we're talking about parts that we're bought into, you can also be bought into experiences, imagination, into different meanings that you create. So you can get bought in when you win a competition, let's say. You can get bought in when you get a raise. You can get bought in to when you find out that the person that you're interested in also likes you back. And this buying in, this continuous buying into something creates the identity that I am a winner, that I win, that I'm successful. And when I say bought in, to break this down even more, what that means is you're just putting extra energy and attention into it. That's much more practical than it actually sounds, because all that means is you just put more of your energy, more of your focus into something. Like, you keep on noticing it. And when you keep on noticing it, we inevitably put a meaning onto it. And then a meaning inevitably forms. And this meaning is, I am a winner. And it happens the same in reverse. You get rejected, you get fired, you lost something that was important to you. All of that extra energy, that extra attention, that extra focus, over time, as you start to notice this pattern, you start to put a meaning onto it because you just want to categorize it. And the categorization is that I'm a loser. And what we buy into becomes foundational to our personality. What we don't slips away and it kind of gets hidden in the shadow. So if you want to talk about shadow work, if you want to talk about therapeutic work, that's why, or at least in part, that's why that stuff gets pushed into shadow, because we're not looking into it. And it makes space for new perspectives, beliefs, and identities. That's how identity, personality, and ego gets shaped over time. So it's reverse engineerable. That's the important part. We stop buying into the realness of the belief and we see how it's been constructed. That's what I want you to think about right now. The reason we have beliefs is because we believe them. Because we believe in them. Because we want to believe in them. So if this element of our beliefs are real and they're just factual, then what's left is we start to see that how all of our beliefs and our identity is constructed. It's constructed not unconsciously and also not consciously. It's somewhere in the middle. Because we're paying attention to something, a meaning arises. That's how it's been constructed. And that's how, just because something's been around us, inside of us for a long time, doesn't actually mean that it has or should be any harder to let go of. Or it should be any harder to reintegrate. It should be any harder to re-own. Because the illusion of time doesn't actually mean anything, because everything is constructed. Our identity is constructed. Now we're going to talk about something called the winner trap, which is, to construct I'm a winner, you must have had experiences that led you to conclude that I'm successful in whatever I do, I'm a winner, and I'm somebody that is unstoppable. But making an identity out of this is inherently fragile, because it still implies in this paradigm that there could be such a thing as a loser. And when you create that polarity within yourself, then there's a part of you which will rush to fill that space. Or there's a part of you which is so abhorred by that reality that you can't own the fact that when you do lose or when you are a loser. Essentially what that means is, if you keep on saying I'm a winner, at some point you're going to lose in life. That's just part of it. And if it's built out of something like this, where you have to really say it and everything has to be made up of that, then that's going to hit you extremely, extremely hard. It's not like you can't say that you're not a winner, or you can't believe it, or you can't think it. But if you put so much force into it, then there's actually implying that you don't actually believe it. However, the distinction here is, if you're a winner, or if you believe that, there's nothing wrong necessarily with believing that. It's just that there's a higher level, and that higher level is, it's not even a question. I'm a winner as an answer. there shouldn't even be a question to the fact that that's a fact. It's something which is deeper. It's something which is more expansive. It's something which is unquestionable. When it becomes unquestionable, even something which is a really strong assertion pales in comparison to that. So, what do we have to do here? We have to exist without the label of identity. That's the true definition of limitless. Like I said before, it's limitless. It's the absence of limit, okay? So an identity or a label is a limit. So this is what I want you to do at the end of this section. I just want you to play with this concept, which is see how certain beliefs and identities were created for you. See what happens when you stop buying in and suspend your disbelief. So remember how I said that beliefs have power because we believe in them, because we want to believe in them, because we're just used to believing in them? Suspend that disbelief using all of the tools that we just talked about there. The last thing that I'll say on this is, first of all, this is very advanced content. Second of all is we're going to get to the actual process of letting go of beliefs and deconstructing them, but this is the most important foundation right here. There needs to be a real clear sight that this belief is constructed. My belief is constructed in this. It's not something that is just real. Like, this thing is not just real. That's the most important thing. And it's something which you get used to over time. And as you get used to over time, it does become much, much easier. And the reason why I included the winner trap is because, yes, it's amazing if we get to the point where we used to think that we're a loser and now we truly believe that we're a winner, but it doesn't stop there. There's a path that leads out of that, which is even deeper and even more anti-fragile. But that's something which probably only very advanced practitioners will find relevant. So part 2, attachment and positive intention. Your most expensive belief. The most expensive belief that you ever had that cost you thousands is that somehow that making money is wrong, it's immoral, it's taking from something. And I'm using this as an example because this is how practical and tangible belief work can be. So I grew up in a poor area of East London, and you're just surrounded by people whose money beliefs are not the best. Now, it's a disadvantage that I was born there. I also want to say that I was still born in London, so in the grand scheme of things, it's still a place where I had a lot of privilege. But when you have that contrast, because London isn't a segregated city, you have really rich people living next to really poor people, and it's actually that contrast which can create these beliefs. Whereas if you just never saw that and everyone kind of lived the same, it doesn't create the same level of friction because you have no contrast, you have nothing to compare yourself to. And that's kind of how the human brain works. It works through contrast. The consensus that I picked up was that if you had money, this was bad because remember, if you don't live in a segregated place and there's rich people and poor people, there's a natural divide between you two that happens just because it's differences. It's just how we work. It's like the tribal part of us, which is activated. So because these people were other, the fact that they had money and then therefore money over time became bad. And that I equated no money was some kind of noble suffering. And that when that happens, what happens is when you have this idea that you have noble suffering, because there's this nobility aspect of it, you don't actually want to let that go, even though you might be suffering, because the nobility, it gives you something to look up to. I mean, for how many years in poems have people been talking about nobility, honor, all of that kind of stuff? There's a real strong drive for us to have that. So, of course you don't want to give it up. Of course I didn't want to give it up. So that I had, over time, this massive identity around not having money or growing up poor was somehow part of me. And it was actually a good thing. And it was giving me all of these extra things when it wasn't doing anything. It was just causing suffering. So how this showed up for me was when I started this business on my own. So I was working with companies before, and then I started this business, Self-Actualisation Systems. I had resistance to naming prices, to set prices that were enough, to have a price at all. Was this even allowed? So if you're listening to this right now, start to draw parallels Like, how does this apply to me? Do I have this? It might not be with money. It could be something similar. When I realized this, when I saw how the environment constructed this, when I saw how it shaped me, when I saw the meaning that I took from this environment, and it wasn't just the truth. Like, it wasn't actually true that having money was bad and not having money was good and it was noble. That wasn't actually the truth. That was something that I just made up in my head. When I realized that, it just took so much weight off my shoulders. Like 80% of this belief releasing work that we're doing was done. And then at the end, all we had to do was the process at the end, which we'll get into later. Because realizing that it was the meaning that you made somehow takes the power out from here and it brings it back into yourself. Because if it's something that's out here, you can't change it. You are powerless. There is nothing you can do. If that's just a fact of the world, then there's nothing you can do about it. But if it's a meaning that you created, you can create another meaning that's more practical, that's more meaningful, that's more accurate, that's more helpful to you. So the real problem here, which is the whole point of this part, is the attachment that I had. What you'll notice when you do this investigation in yourself, hopefully you picked kind of a belief that's coming up for you or a symptom and you kind of working through it with me. What you'll notice is that even though there's something bad that it's giving you, if I just come up here, there's always something, there's always a positive intention here about what a belief that's causing you suffering is giving you. And it was the idea of being noble. And that was the attachment I had to it. I had a lot of attachment to that aspect of myself. I wanted to be noble. I wanted to be honorable. I wanted to be cool. And I didn't want to give that up. That's the important part. However, the breakthrough here for you is to realize that this belief that's causing you suffering is not the only path to have this. Like, I can just allow myself to be noble, to live with integrity, to have honor, whatever you want to call it. I could just allow myself to have that. I didn't have to have a bad money belief about it. So you always want to, when you're doing the investigation, the first one, you want to look at how something's constructed, when it was constructed, how you're still constructing it, how you're participating in it. You always want to include the next step, which is, what is this belief giving me? If we're using this example, what is being bad with money giving me? What's the positive intention here? If you skip this, every belief resolution you attempt is like trying to climb a hill with an anchor strapped to your back. I'm not even joking. That's literally what it feels like. And my nobility was a placeholder for self-esteem, for letting myself feel good about myself. And the criteria that had to be met for me to be a good person was that I had to be bad with money, or I wasn't able to make money. I wasn't able to charge money. So after this happened, after this resolution happened, my revenue doubled, and it even tripled in some cases over the next couple of months. That's pretty fast. Doesn't always happen instantly, but it can happen very soon. So that's the tangible benefit that this gave me. Because I no longer had resistance charging prices, no longer had resistance actually knowing what I was worth. I no longer had resistance going out and offering stuff to people. I was able to grow. I had all of this internal friction was just gone, and it was able to, and all of the energy that was left over was able to be poured into the business. So the homework for you is identify which belief is causing you the most stress. The one that, if solved, would have the most noticeable and tangible difference to your life. So you want to ask, what is this belief's positive intention? What is this belief trying to give me? And then what you can do is write out 10 things that you can do that give you this thing other than this belief. It can be 10 things you can believe, 10 things you can do, just 10 other options, because what this will do is it will increase breadth to your ego development, and it will allow you to see that this is not the only path, this is not the only keys to the kingdom, essentially. And the result of this will be the allure of the belief will drop massively. In a lot of cases, it can be dropped completely. And what you'll find that will happen here is there might even be resistance to look into this or to even do this, because deep down you kind of know that this will be the end of this identity. And that's okay. You can be compassionate to yourself. And part 3, what we're going to be getting into, is something which I call the meta block. So seeing the positive intention is crucial. Like I said, making money is bad, one positive intention. We don't want to be a bad person, exploitative. It's not all about the money, letting it take over our joy and fulfillment of life. And what it does is it establishes a state of compassion. So I just mentioned compassion there, but we start to see how this belief is not actually bad. It's not out to get us. It's actually there to help us if we think about it. And from this state of compassion, we can go much deeper in confronting shadows because they're less confronting, because compassion is a self-soothing mechanism. It's almost like a lubricant of a car. It just makes everything run smoothly. And a lot of the time, seeing the positive intention automatically drops the judgment in a conflict and friction you have with yourself. However, the meta block that we're going to be discussing right now is transformational change actually possible for me? And the reason why it has its whole section here is because unless this changes, it's going to be very hard for you to do belief work. So it's not, is incremental change possible for me? Is change possible for me? Is transformational change actually possible? Where there's a big transformation that can happen due to this work. Not just, oh, I act a little bit differently, I feel a bit more relaxed. It's, oh wait, this problem actually doesn't affect me anymore. Like, I'm actually not worried about this. Let's say if someone really struggled with body image, I'm working with someone who struggles with body image. There's incremental change, like, oh, I feel better about myself, even on the bad days. And then transformational change would be, I don't have an issue with body image anymore. Totally, like it doesn't come up anymore. So this usually applies to people who are already pretty successful, who's already been doing self-actualization for some time, possibly been to therapy too, to work on their insecurities. And they've had a lot of incremental change, but for whatever reason, they never actually had an experience where they've totally fundamentally changed in a session or over a longer time period. And it comes from the fact that maybe we've just been doing symptom work, or we've just been doing trigger work, or maybe we've even been getting into the mental processes of how we actually think, but there's never been an actual attempt, or if there has been an attempt, maybe it's just been really sticky, or the person you're working with there hasn't been a good relationship, or something like that. There's so many different reasons that they can happen. Maybe you're also not ready, you just need a bit more time, but you never actually got to the deep-rooted issues that you've had forever. And that can create an identity or a storyline if we go back to if we go back to the underdog, if we go back to the confidence in dating, if we go back to the fact that I have been bought into the storyline, and if I win a competition, I'm a winner. We get bought in to the, hopefully I don't lose where I am, we get bought into the identity of, oh wait, like I keep on going to therapy, or I keep on working on myself, but nothing's actually changed. And then this pops up. Is transformational change actually possible? And that, if this is you, you need to be using this whole masterclass on that until it goes. So an example of this is someone who's not called Steve, but we'll call him Steve for client confidentiality. He's a medical doctor. He's a super smart, astute, hardworking guy. Before he met me, he'd been doing years of therapy. He'd been doing years of alternative coaching, alternative therapy, and traditional coaching, plus also working on himself, reading everything. The whole reason he wanted to get into medicine is because he was more interested in the psychological aspect of it, but his parents wanted him to do more traditional medicine. So due to some conformity and wanting to live up to their expectations, he did this instead. But he's always been very interested in health. And he had an immensely harsh inner critic that stifled him and stopped him taking risks. And this stopped him from being able to be fully authentic with his romantic and sexual needs in relationships. Also just expressing himself around friends and family, and feeling like he always had to kind of put on a mask and put on a performance. And he was constantly checking in with the outside world to let it know, or let him know, that he was safe, he was worthy, he was valuable. And how this manifested on calls is, before, he would end calls early because he got what he needed. Upper comfort zone of change is what we call it. So you can have an upper comfort zone of change and a lower comfort zone of change. A lower comfort zone is something's really confronting. How much can we stay in that before we have to use some kind of avoidance mechanism, like a habit like smoking, porn, or something like that, to get us back in our normal comfort zone? An upper comfort zone is when we have feelings that are too intense of like happiness or joy, and it's something we're so not used to, and then we have to use a habit or an avoidance cycle to get back into our normal comfort zone, and they're usually the same habits. And he had a problem with an upper comfort zone of change, but after we addressed it, everything shifted tangibly, because he stopped being a medical doctor and he founded his own business, which he's still doing to this day. Tons of risk that the inner critic kept on shutting down. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is he had an issue around transformational change, because he'd done all of the years of therapy, alternative coaching, traditional coaching, and working on himself, and he never actually experienced a real transformational change process. And I'm not saying the stuff he was doing wasn't good at all. I'm sure it was really good. It's like a mixture of different things, right? The person he's working with, their personal relationship, if they have chemistry, also his experience, losing innocence, all of that kind of stuff. But when we worked together, a big part of it was addressing this, because this came up a few times. And once this was addressed, he was able to have this kind of change. Because also what happened is he now is in a safe, secure, and loving relationship where piece by piece, he's still working on it. He owned more of his romantic side and his sexuality, which he'd been using the tools of avoidance to kind of keep at arm's length. He's now also much more naturally disagreeable, setting boundaries, saying what he likes and he dislikes, because he's no longer afraid of how he's being received, whereas the inner critic would have judged him for acting in that kind of way. Whereas before there was no boundaries, there was just a lot of resentment that got built up. He got taken advantage of actually a lot of times in relationships by the women that he was dating, and also the women he was choosing. I mean, of course they were going to do that too, but that was a whole other conversation. And also other people's validation is not put on a pedestal. This includes his family, like his father and his mum, which is more applicable to him. This can only happen once this belief is taken care of, this meta block is taken care of. Is transformational change actually possible? So if you haven't addressed this and you feel like it might be a thing, this is the thing that you have to do first. So what's the process of this? One is notice when you first started noticing this as a problem. So we'll go through the transformational change one, but if you have a different belief that you want to go through, then just replace it for that. So we want to notice when we first started noticing this as a problem. I first started noticing this. I'm going to play it out like I was Steve. I first started noticing this when it was about year 3 into doing therapy. And whilst I'd been able to manage symptoms a bit better, I was feeling less stressed. I don't actually feel like I went through a change. Okay, cool. 2, stay with this longer than necessary to see if it's actually where this started. Do not copy my length. The reason why I'm doing this is because A, this doesn't apply to me, and B, I've done this so many times that I can get to the root, because it's kind of what I do over here. You need to stay with it because it's not going to be obvious when it first comes up. In fact, there's a good rule of thumb, which is the most things that come out of your mouth in the first part of when you're doing your investigation is just going to be your conscious babble, your conscious storylines, stuff which you've said over and over and over again. So you need to keep on asking that. And then when did I keep on noticing that? When did this really start? Is there something that I'm missing? Is there an angle which I'm not looking at? Because you really do not want to rush this. If you rush this, you're just going to be participating in the same old storylines that you already know so well. And it's not going to do anything. In fact, it's just going to solidify your identity and your beliefs for even longer, unfortunately. 3, once you're sure of the event, of the series of events, of the time period, of the overarching time period, when you started to notice this attachment, when you started to notice this belief was really coming into formation, you go back to what we talked about in part 1 and part 2, which is you notice your attachment and then you notice the positive intention behind that attachment, because that's what's driving the attachment. Number 4, you close your eyes if it's easy for you. And this can be a somatic feeling, or this can be a visualization. It can be something more symbolic. At some point, you want to visualize symbolically, or maybe even tangibly, giving back this meaning to where it came from. Because the reason we have this belief and this meaning, remember it's constructed, It was given to us by an external circumstance. We created it, we co-created it, but it was because of an external circumstance or series of events that this got created. For example, for Steve, it was created because he kept on going to high-level therapists and high-level coaches and reading all the right books and wasn't actually seeing a result. So yes, he co-created the meaning, is transformational change even possible for me? But it's a co-creation. It was created in conjunction with these events. So these events gave you this belief. You can give this belief back. It's as simple as that. It's as straightforward as that. It's as complex as that. So the easiest way to do this is to actually just visualize it, giving this belief back. And you just stay with that. Because what it will feel like when you actually do give this belief back, it's not the visualization that gives it back. The visualization just helps it. It's you actually giving your belief in the thing back and saying, I don't want this. Remember, it's active. It's you. You're the one doing this. This is not the visualization that's doing this. The reason you have this belief is because you believe it. The reason you have this belief is because you think it's giving you something. The reason you have this belief is because there's some attachment to it. You're giving all of that back. The visualization is just a vehicle to help you with that. And then you stay with this until you feel relief. What this will feel like with beliefs, with ego states and projections, they feel very different. But with belief, it feels like a weight's been lifted off your shoulder. It feels like all this fear, all this guilt, all this stress, this massive anchor that you have strapped to your back is being given off. And then what's in place of it is a massive lightness, a massive clearness, but also a massive empty space. And we're not trying to fill that empty space yet. And the easiest way to reality check this is, we're going to be using the example of, is transformational change really possible for me? We're going to ask, is this type of change possible for me? And it'll be subtle at first, but over time, it will slowly, the answer of yes will be getting stronger. Don't try and jump to fill in that space. Just allow the answer to come from that. The doors of possibility open. So now, part 4, we're going to be going into even more detail into the process. We need to identify the frame of the belief. So I hear some people asking me, oh, Aaron, I'm trying to give it back, but I just feel like this attachment is there and it's just kind of confusing. We need to get the what, the when, and the how understood of this belief. So the what is what we believe. The when is when we started to believe it. Okay, let's not do that. The how is, how are we sustaining this belief? How are we reinforcing this belief? How are we recycling the same old stale belief over and over again? You have to kick out each of these legs from the tripod in order for the belief to be able to be given back. That's why there's so much confusion online about inner work. The process is overcomplicated, it's mystified, and it's just plain misunderstood in my opinion, obviously. And it happened on my journey too. But this is the 3 things that is going to enable, in the process, the visualization of giving it back so that you can actually feel relief and not actually believe in this anymore, okay? So the what. All you want to do is get a handle on the what, and then you stop. So this is the root cause of what you believe to be true about yourself. This gets a handle on the process. It's like being able to get a grip on it so you can give it back, so that you have enough context. An example of this is, I believe that I'm not enough. That's enough. You don't need to go any deeper. You don't need to self-flagellate yourself. You don't need to feel it anymore. Nothing. Otherwise, you just get stuck in the symptoms and the mental process aware. If you do that, it's just going to take years off your process. Do not spin your wheels here. It wastes so much time and energy. Oh my God, I can't believe that. I can't even begin to tell you how much time and energy that makes you suffer with. Because it just gets you deeper into symptoms. Like I said, I did this a lot. Don't make the same mistakes as me. This is the most straightforward section by far. The when. This is when you unpick the thread. When did I first start to notice this problem? You'll get a vague-ish answer. Remember the third part we just went through? This is the part that we're addressing right now. And then you want to work your way back from there. It's like unpicking a thread. You'll become more concise the more you unpick it. Example. Watching your parents constantly chase achievement, money, and status to show off to others. This is a few of my clients, actually. and learning from them that you had to do this too. Why this matters is this shows the belief isn't innately you. It came from somewhere, again, the constructed nature of things. It naturally liberates any subtle, I'm cursed, I was always like this is just me, this is just who I am, I just have to deal with it. It changes all of that. Because it's not possible to be any of those things. Because if it comes from something, it's something which can go back to where it came from. We are not born with beliefs about the world, because when we're an infant, we don't have the comprehensive ability to believe anything. So it had to have come from somewhere. And now how, this is the most important, it's also the most complex. It's also, honestly, the part which I never see anyone talk about, or if they do, they just kind of brush over it. And this is broken down into 3 different parts. How you created the issue for yourself, how you're sustaining the issue for yourself, and how you took the meaning of this issue to begin with. So we'll go into number 1. Go back to the last time you were triggered by the belief. A specific trigger. It has to be specific. Like an example, talking about your work or business to a friend, and they mentioned how for them it's been very easy to make more money or hit their monetary goals. A specific friend, a specific time, a specific place. Always add specifics, because the more specific you get, the easier the next parts get. So you ask yourself, once you have a real grip onto the trigger, what is it about this specific trigger that made me feel not good enough? In other words, how did my mind create this into a trigger? That's so, so important. How specifically, because somebody else can go through that and they don't get triggered by it. So what is specifically within me that makes me trigger it? And specifically within my mental processes. Remember, nothing is universally triggering, more or less. There are some, but this is not one of those. Our beliefs are not one of those, most likely. So there's something specifically happening in our mind which makes us into a trigger. The formula is what plus when plus how equals the core root of what we're dealing with. 2, how are we sustaining this? This is massive. Check that you're not holding on to the belief. A lot of the time, all of the time, we're actively sustaining our beliefs, okay? Usually because we think it's a part of us, we think it's helpful, positive intention, everything I talked about before, or we have some form of attachment to it, generally speaking. You need to let that go. You need to stop your active participation in the co-creation of this thing and the sustainment of it. It feels like you're taking on a massive weight, and in some ways you are, but you're also taking on massive empowerment, because suddenly it becomes something that's happening from us, not something that's happening to us. Now, number 3, how we took the meaning. We talked about this a little bit before, but this is usually uncovered in the when section. The unpicking the thread section. But if it isn't, you ask how you took that belief into yourself. And the most common answers are from observation, from experience, from being told that this is just how we do things around here. And then we want to close the process. Now we've reached the core root and we can give the belief back. So we go back to the process here and we go back to this. And we stay with it until we feel relief. And that right there is the most comprehensive masterclass on the internet about how you can deconstruct, give back your beliefs. What we're going to be going over next time, so stay tuned for this, is what we do after this. There's a massive relief, there's a massive space that's left over. And the next part is going to be how we actually embed something much more holistic, much more authentic, much more limitless into our consciousness. But for now, that's the Beliefs Masterclass. I'll see you on the next one.